Well, hello there, everybody. My name is Josh, and today we're going to explore the bright colors of neurodiversity to flip the script on stigma. Color is a spectrum, and there are some frequencies that society can't quite see. Colors that go outside of the line, outside of our conventional boxes. Having been diagnosed bipolar 1 myself, I've experienced the labels and stigma that can stick me in a box. Life's confusing, and I understand why we use category boxes as shortcuts of the mind, little heuristic goes-to that makes the diversity of life easier to wrap our heads around. Simpler. But the mind is flexible, and neuroplasticity is a beautiful thing. Sometimes those of us with diagnoses can bump our heads on those boxes, and it's kind of claustrophobic in there. Like even this box. You know, I wonder if we can transcend boxes with our minds a little bit here today. Oh my word, it's just like I suspected and had experiences of in my bipolar state. The line between the inner world and the outer world isn't as solid as we thought. It's permeable. I wonder if I can stand up within the framework of a box and stretch out. Whoa! Much better. Liberty. I always suspected that was possible, and thank you guys for being here and giving me the impetus to try it out. And who are you might ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. My name is Josh, and I was born and raised in Cape Town, South Africa. Hence the strange sound of the syllables streaming from my lips. I've traveled a ton, but you know what's the most interesting terrain I've ever explored? The mysterious and treasure-filled and sometimes treacherous depths of the human mind. This led to my bipolar 1 diagnosis, 6 involuntary psychiatric hospitalizations, 2 arrests, relational and financial havoc, and much more. So yes, there can be a lot of mess that comes with metamorphosis. But this bipolar metamorphosis has also given me some of the most sublime, profound, and colorful experiences of my life. It's given me an absolute passion for the human mind and soul, the intersection of psychology and theology. It compelled me to study them academically too, and I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of South Africa, and then went to get my master's degree from Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. I now have the epic privilege of working alongside you guys in the San Diego mental health community. I live in San Marcos with my wife and 2 little daughters and work for NAMI. Becoming a peer support specialist has been an absolutely beautiful and life-changing path to walk down. And the future's looking bright for the peer movement with the passing of the SB 803 bill the other day. This field has given me a deep meaning and purpose, a meaning and purpose which transcend boxes, and today has landed me on your screens. And I'm expecting my buddy Chelsea from NAMI any minute now. She also lives outside of boxes and may actually be outside of the box of the screen.
Hi, Josh. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea of NAMI San Diego. I also love working in the mental health field and helping people overcome barriers and get out of boxes. I'm listening to all this and enjoying it. And I'll be chiming in every now and again because some of these themes have been really important to me in my journey.
That is most excellent, Chelsea. Looking forward to having you pop in and out of the screen like a quantum particle again. We're going to use our screens to step outside of some boxes of mental health paradigms today in this meeting of the minds, and then take steps to increase the liberation of our people here in San Diego. Mental health is our thing. America is our thing. And a big kudos to Mental Health America for contributing to liberating people from some of society's boxes today with the theme of stigma. We can't judge other people's paths if we haven't walked their journeys. Their journeys originate in many different places and times. They can be colorful, just like human culture and the human mind are colorful. Those of us who are neurodiverse can sometimes shine in colors that aren't recognized or appreciated by broader society. So today we're going to paint a picture of how those colors have and can be used. What we're going to do is expand our perspectives to counter stigma in 3 sections: each with 3 subsections. Because the microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm. Well, yeah. In section 1, we're going to step beyond the bounds of our time and beyond chronocentrism, or the assumption that our time is the pinnacle of knowledge in all domains. We're going to look at 3 historical geniuses who enriched the world with the products of their neurodiverse minds, despite their mental health diagnoses: Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, and Carl Jung. Then in the second section, we're going to take steps to expand beyond culturocentrism, being stuck in our cultural mode to the detriment of the big picture. We'll travel and collect cognitive souvenirs from exotic paradigms, exploring the models of South African Sangomas, a Native American perspective, and Filipino Babalans. We're then going to take a brief experiential interlude and use an optical illusion to point out the legitimacy of multiple perspectives. Quack up. Then we'll move on to the third section and explore 3 spiritual models that relate to mental health conditions: Plato, the Greeks, monotheism, and Advaita Vedanta Hinduism. And then, to tie it all together, we'll discuss some of the practical implications of these biopsychosocial spiritual perspectives in the San Diego mental health field. How alternative paradigms can supplement the biomedical model and serve to counter the stigma around mental health conditions, which will ultimately encourage people with these experiences to reach out. 3 take-homes that you'll hopefully leave this presentation with are: you'll be able to recognize the time and culture-bound nature of stigma. You'll be empowered to access mental health experiences in light of a broader context. And you'll be able to advocate for yourself and those you care about within the San Diego mental health system. Let's dive in. The water's warm here in San Diego. 3 historical genius perspectives and famous case studies. Our modern world is incredible. Science has had enormous impact on our lives, both for the good and for the bad. I'd say mostly for the good. This scientific air we breathe in our education systems is one valid mode of thinking. But that doesn't mean that there aren't others. If you think about past eras where there was much less distraction, people explored their minds and souls with profound depth. People were able to explore the inner workings of their minds and align with the outside world in profound ways. The creative power inherent in many mental health diagnoses is fairly well known in the world of art. Here is a list of famous artists and poets from K. Redfield Jamison's book, Touch with Fire, that Katie Holmes made a movie of. It's just quick, so feel free to take a screenshot. Because what we're going to explore today is maybe not as well known, that the world of science is built on foundations laid by geniuses with mental health diagnoses too. The right brain for sure, but also the left. This section is a kudos to the field of science and the biomedical model, before we explore some alternative paradigms in the culture and spirituality sections. I'd like to introduce you to 3 different sides of Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, and Carl Jung.
Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Carl Jung, you say? These 3 people are all personal heroes of mine. It's always given me comfort to study their writing. They didn't always fit in, and their ideas were radical.
Isaac Newton. The man came up with the laws of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The law of gravity as he watched the apple fall, and major discoveries in optics, astronomy, and mathematics. He invented calculus, so you can thank him for those classes he had to take. He laid the foundation of modern science, which undergirded inventions from the steam engine to the space rocket. Newtonian physics. Ironically, the basis some scientists use for reductionism, boiling everything down to atoms colliding with each other. Would you be surprised to learn that Newton spent more of his time writing on theology, the study of God, than he spent on writing on physics? It's true. He wrote about 1.3 million words on biblical subjects, exploring the world of the inner life. And he was a character. Born in Lincolnshire, England, in the year of our Lord, 1643, Isaac wasn't a typical kid. He spent most of his time by himself and didn't play with other kids. He just built little models of things. Even as an adult, he hardly conversed with people. He was described as high-strung, egotistical, and dominant. He would have seasons of high energy, sometimes working 5 days straight with 0 sleep. He hallucinated and had conversations with absent people. At times, he believed everyone was out to destroy him. He believed he was appointed by God to bring his truth to the world and became obsessed with religion. immersing himself in alchemy and studying it in secret for 25 years, searching for mysterious elixirs and writing thousands of pages on the subject. And then he would crash. His notebooks in college document anxiety, sadness, fear, a low opinion of himself, and suicidal thoughts, depression. Sound familiar? Bipolar type 1. I feel you, Newts. We have something else in common with Newton, quarantine. He escaped Cambridge in 1665 because of the Great Plague. And guess what? Those were some of the most productive years of his life, and is called Annus Mirabilis, or the Year of Wonders, because of all the discoveries in that period. There is hope yet. He has been called the greatest scientific genius the world has ever known, and was buried like a king. But he himself said that the realms of possibility his mind tapped into were only scratching the surface. He said, "I don't know what I may seem to the world, but as to myself, I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or prettier shell than ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. Discover we shall." Tesla. Imagine those undiscovered realms of possibility came to you in pre-configured design pictures in your mind, and all you had to do was then build them according to the designs. Introducing Nikola Tesla, the inventor of AC electricity, who Elon Musk named his electric car company after. Shout out to the South Africans. A spark of genius and a spark of eccentricity often go hand in hand, and they sure did in Tesla's case. Born in Eastern Europe in what is now Croatia in 1856, Tesla had the gene. His dad used to have furious arguments with himself, changing his voice tone for the different character. His brother also displayed these kinds of mental health anomalies, and Tesla's own began after trauma, a common theme. He watched his brother die from being trampled by a horse. Tragic. We'll talk later about how trauma can sometimes unleash these states. Tesla moved to New York when he was 28 with 4 cents in his pocket, and there he worked hard. Like Isaac Newton, Tesla would go through periods of hardly sleeping. He used to say that he only ever slept 2 hours a night, and legends have it that he once worked 84 hours straight without a second of rest. When life is a waking dream, maybe the need for sleep decreases. Tesla used to have visions that were hard for him to distinguish from shared reality. He would see spontaneous flashes of light, which he likened to the air around me filled with tongues of living flame, which is exactly how the Holy Spirit is described in the biblical book of Acts. When someone mentioned an object, it would appear to Tesla in vivid detail. Sometimes he would have spontaneous visions that gave him the solutions to problems he'd had. And his visions would contain creations that he had never seen before. He'd visualize inventions in his mind with extreme precision, including all dimensions, and then run them in his head. He said in 20 years, every single one of the things he built worked exactly like they did when he envisioned them operating in his mind. He typically did not make drawings by hand, but worked from memory. He was certainly eccentric too, and had characteristics of OCD. He would stack exactly 18 napkins on a plate before he touched his food. It had to be exactly 18 because 18 is divisible by 3. Tesla did everything in threes. He was often overcome by a compulsion to walk around the block 3 times, and he would count his steps as he did. When he stayed in hotels, he insisted on a room number that could be divided by 3, and demanded that 18 towels be delivered every morning. Tesla had an intense fear of germs that controlled every part of his life. He drank heavily, claiming it gave him bursts of energy and kept him alive. He also fell in love with a pigeon, as you do. He said, "I loved her as a man loves a woman, and she loved me." He worked with Thomas Edison before falling out with him, and Tesla's innovations paved the way to inventions of the FM radio, spark plugs, early computers, fluorescent light bulbs, electrical generators, AC electricity, remote controls, the Tesla coil, X-rays and wireless communications, the radio, the list goes on. The US Supreme Court upheld Tesla's intellectual property with its involvement in the invention of the radio, but sadly it was not until 1943 after he had died. So many of Tesla's ideas, wireless electricity for example, were so far ahead of their time that they were not fully appreciated until recent years. He died broke, and once gave a death ray box in exchange for a hotel bill that he couldn't pay, but told them not to open it You don't want to open death ray boxes. When he described his state of mind, it makes me think of many of the people that I work with. He said, I had so much energy to spare. Back in the deep recesses of the brain was a solution, but I could not always give it outward expression. I believe we can help people to access that insight within, even if the insight isn't into physics, but into the non-material mind. Tesla said, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in a decade than in all of the previous centuries of its existence. 19 years after Tesla was born, there was another genius who specialized in the non-physical, the study of the soul, psychology. His name was Carl Jung. Born in 1875, Carl Jung was the Swiss founder of analytical and depth psychology. He's had a megalithic impact on the field of psychology, bringing us constructs like the introverted and extroverted personality types, persona, and archetypes. Jung came up with the term synchronicities and believed that underneath all of our individual consciousness was a collective consciousness that we shared. He took a very different approach to spirituality than his atheist mentor Freud. The son of a pastor, Jung was fascinated with religion and mysticism. He claimed to have had relationships with spirit guides who provided him with many of his insights. Physician, heal thyself. And Jung did. He was, as he described in his own words, menaced with a psychosis and feared becoming permanently psychotic. These experiences began around 38 years old, and he had visions of Europe being flooded just before the World War and heard voices of the dead. He made a large, beautiful picture book called the Red Book, filled with these waking visions, sometimes induced through his technique called active imagination, where he encountered biblical characters. Yet he was able to function well in daily life. His understanding of the state of psychosis is what undergirds Joseph Campbell's, the famous comparative religion professor and mythologist who is a Jungian. Joseph Campbell said that the person in psychosis is drowning in the same water in which the mystic swims with delight. And how does all this work on a physical level? Jung had some theories. He actually collaborated with quantum physicist pioneer Wolfgang Pauli. He believed that mind and matter were two sides of the same coin. He came up with the term the unus mundus to describe this one world. We'll touch on this non-duality again in the Hinduism section. Jung believed that psychosis served to integrate egocentric consciousness into a greater whole, this unus mundus. He viewed psychosis, with its synchronicity-like delusions of reference, where the unus mundus appears to be communicating with you, as a waking dream. Von Franz, a close collaborator with Jung, explains that synchronistic phenomena are only observable when our ego consciousness becomes dimmed. With ego boundary dissolution, the person is able to see the unity of the internal and the external worlds. Jung had explored both deeply, and his book Memories, Dreams, and Reflections is one of my favorites. He knew there was a lot to gain from cultures other than his own. And there is. So let's gain it in section 2. 3 cultural perspectives. Culture is the water that we swim in. Unless we step outside of our own waters for a moment, we may not even recognize the conditioned nature of it. So we're going to take a geographical journey to 3 continents today despite COVID's travel restrictions. It's still recommended you buckle your safety belt though. Part of that safety belt can also be keeping things in the broader context and explore lines of thinking that can supplement the biomedical model while maintaining respect for it. Bear in mind, I'm a fan of the biomedical model, and certain medications helped me keep afloat when I was drowning in my bipolar states. The exposure to these diverse perspectives is not to say that they've got it right and we've got it wrong. It's just to broaden the lens through which we view these states of mind, allowing them to pick up previously hidden color frequencies.
Studying and immersing myself in different cultures has enriched my life in so many ways. It's been very important to my recovery to study the wisdom perspectives of the East. These are particularly close to my heart. I'm going to come back and talk more about this in the next section.
Chelsea made her own journey westward to San Diego. And even though our city is united under the red, white, and blue, we're a cultural hotspot with microcosms of culture existing right here. As you can see, we have people from European, African, Asian, Hawaiian, and Hispanic descent. Each of these cultures has unique perspectives on our place in the cosmos, and having treatment frameworks that allow us to understand where people are coming from, literally, allows us to synergize with them as we walk with them on their unique paths. Today we're going to talk about examples of mental health perspectives from Africa, the Americas, and Asia, the Sangomas of South Africa, a Native American perspective, and the Babalan of the Philippines. Africa. Sangoma is a Zulu term for the traditional healers or medicine men and women of South Africa. These are highly respected members of society, consulted by about 60% of the South African population, usually in conjunction with modern biomedical services. Sangomas get into altered states of consciousness through drumming or other methods, and then communicate with the ancestors and spirits to solve unfinished business and heal people of their ills. Their call to become a Sangoma comes through an experience of psychosis and physical illness, which gets worse until they say yes to the call and are trained under an elder Sangoma. During this training, called ukuthwasa, the initiate will share their ailments in the form of story, a process that is nurtured by the analysis of dreams, anxieties, and prayer. The story develops into a song and dance, which become a large part of the graduation type ceremony that marks the end of the training. How cool would it be to do this with our people in San Diego? The Sangomas are known as uplifters, the ones who cause things to ascend. That's us in the mental health community. The initiate is then tested by the community at the end of their training by having objects hidden, and them using non-physical sight to, without hesitation, find the objects. Their ability to do these kinds of reductionist science-defying feats has been proven by Westerners too. And a close friend of my family's, who we used to see once a week growing up, came from the line of Sangomas and spoke of her many dreams of premonitions that came true. Wait a minute, that's not what we were taught in school, you might say. No, it's not. But being educated to believe these things are not possible may make them not possible. Think about the necessity of faith in the Christian tradition. And an interesting academic study found that the more Western education the Sangomas had, the less successful their healings were. But in Western education, we are taught about the field of epigenetics, and these themes of our genetic stories and influence of our ancestors are strong in Western culture, being dominant themes in Disney movies like Frozen 2 and Moana. The colorful DNA patterns of our ancestral tree. Because like Jung said, our consciousness may be more global and connected than we think. A Sangoma named Ingo, who went on to get his PhD, explains that ethnographic data from 437 societies worldwide revealed that trance-induced auditory and visual experiences or hallucinations are found in 89% of cultures surveyed. And they're often intentionally induced, sometimes through so-called plant medicines or entheogens. In relation to this, we're in the midst of a psychedelic or entheogenic renaissance in America, and with the important overlap in these altered states and psychosis, psychedelics were originally called psychotomimetics because they mirrored psychosis so closely, I believe that's another important topic for the mental health community to map out, and wise cautions to highlight on both sides of the debate. Ingo goes on to say, I consider hearing voices in shamanism to be closely associated with trance states. This is not dissimilar to findings that hearing voices or auditory hallucinations in the psychotic literature may in fact be based on dissociation. Such dissociations, often based on trauma, like with Tesla, could be understood as producing uncontrollable trance states. The shaman, on the other hand, handles dissociation in a controlled manner. There is an emphasis on that. The voices and visions should serve the community and be trained. I had an opportunity for this training, but I turned it down. I once visited a Sangoma in a grass hut in the wilderness of South Africa before I was diagnosed bipolar. He told me, but not the people with me, that I had the gift and invited me to come live with him for a few months so he could teach me how to talk to the birds. As enticing as that was, I ate the brother's ritual spinach he gave me and didn't take him up on the offer. I had a plane ticket to another continent. And we're going to journey away from Africa now and back to our beloved Americas. But we're going to touch down wearing a different set of lenses of natural balance. We're beings of nature, and Native American culture emphasizes the harmonious balance of nature. We need to incorporate nature's laws into human laws. But we've forgotten this balance. This is a spiritual, cognitive, emotional, social, and physical balance. Health doesn't mean being without an illness. Rather, it means being empowered through knowledge of the illness and honest self-awareness. Harmony consists in maintaining our well-being and symptoms while having hope and a purpose. Nature has cycles, like bipolar does. Humans want to control everything, and Native American culture says that this is the problem. Our greed interrupts nature's way of life. But we need to listen to nature. She teaches us. We can stop and listen to the wind, the voices of the past, the breath of life. The birds, the coyotes, and the elements communicate with us. Wind, water, and fire have their own life and spirit. We can't control them. That's why floods, earthquakes, and fire put humanity in check. Within ancient stones lies the memory of the past and the knowledge of the future. Think about the rock creatures in Disney's Frozen. Native Americans hold ceremonies to awaken the stones by heating them up and then pouring water on them. The steam coming from the stones is the breath of the ancestors, the breath of life that gives insight and allows us to share our dreams and prayers. Our mind's eye, our third eye, allows us to interpret inner thoughts and visions. Through sacred fires, ceremonies, and dances, Native American cultures remember the past. Our ancestors' spirits, identities, power, and sacredness exist within us. There are stories that may be different to the surrounding culture and are trying to write their narratives into our lives. Jimmy Kelly, Kopah Cherokee Native American who works with NAMI and SAMHSA, says about people in Native American communities. Oftentimes, persons who had a significantly different way of thinking were an asset to their community due to the insights and perspectives they had to offer. Today in Western culture, those differences are viewed as illnesses, and the objective of society is to minimize that difference through clinical treatment. In the pursuit of balance and harmony, it's important to recognize the contributions that persons with different thinking have to offer, and also to help facilitate their gifts through individualized treatment, bringing forth the fruit offered by different thinking and establishing the value of these individuals in their communities. When the goal of clinical treatment is to honor mental health experiences rather than suppress them, then we will have moved towards finding balance and harmony with the human mind and with the communities in which we live. And it's in our hands to do. Native American culture emphasizes that what we do in this century will set the stage for future generations, for our kids. And we can be the ancestors that build colorful bridges for the neurodiverse amongst our kids. A Chumash Native American Indian tells how color can transport us to new places of opportunity. It describes how, after giving them the gift of fire, the Creator created a rainbow bridge that they walked over to lead them from Santa Cruz Island to the mainland to explore all the opportunity that was here. And we're going to cross our final intercontinental bridge of this section and head out east to the Philippines. The Babalan, who are predominantly female, are shaman in the Philippines. Like the Native Americans, they believe nature communicates with us. They believe in two types of spirits: environmental or nature spirits bound to a particular location or natural phenomenon, like the wind, and two unbound spirits that can appear as birds, which I could have learned to talk to, remember, or human-like forms that are similar to the fairies of European folklore. The Babalan shaman distinguished between two kinds of illnesses: natural and spiritual illnesses. The natural ones don't require a shaman for healing, while the spiritual ones do. They require a Babalan, a shaman. The Babalan is a very respected noble class status, and it's a lucrative status too. In the absence of the Datu, the head of the community, the Babalan leads the community. Their position is usually inherited, genetics again, nature, and guided, nurture. In nature, their epigenetic potential can be unlocked, and like in the South African Sangomas, many experience a shamanistic initiatory crisis or psychosis. The name Babalan is rooted on the Sanskrit word meaning a fit of sudden, inexplicable trembling attributed to the people of the Malay Peninsula to supernatural agency. It can include visions and climbing trees without remembering how you got there. The soul, or kalag, of the person is said to be journeying to the spirit realm, where their spirit guides stop them from getting lost and stuck there. This separation normally happens during sleep, where the kalug detaches to travel through the spirit world, resulting in dreams. But when the separation happens when the person is awake, it results in spiritual illnesses, including psychosis. And then, through the process of nurture, a Babalan is trained through ritual, a process called tuparan, which they are cured through answering the call, and an initiation process that involves leaving what you know, being at the edge of yourself and suffering, and then learning about yourself in bliss. The book called Shaman as Psychologist says that the phenomenon of an overpowering mental crisis is a characteristic of the shamanic call all over the world, and is like the stage of departure from one's accustomed way of life. He talks about the ancient belief that one must die in order to live again, being the basis of all existence as we know it. In these initiatory experiences, they also taught history, herbal remedies, spells, rituals, chants, songs, sacrifices, and craft. The shaman candidate generally gets over this initial onslaught of madness or psychosis. He gets cured, and then his initiation into the ranks of shaman begins, and they can do things like tell the future. Well, these perspectives do seem different than our own, don't they? Is it possible that two sets of metaphors of language and concepts could both be right in their own way? Check out this picture. What animal do you see? Quiet bunch. That's okay. There's golden profundity and silence sometimes. It's a duck. No, it's a bunny. No, you can see it's a duck. What are you talking about? It's a bunny. What if I started quacking before I showed you the picture? Would you be more likely to see the duck? And what if I asked, "What's up, doc?" over and over? Would you be more likely to see the bunny? The ideas we expose people to define the contours of their experience, and our enculturation is a powerful force. In the West, the pendulum may have swung too far towards the left brain analytical science side, and forgot that another picture also exists. Cognitive dissonance doesn't need to throw us. It can be an intriguing part of the ride as we embrace the both and of non-duality. Let's talk about that in our final section, spiritual models.
Vedanta and the practice of yoga has profoundly impacted my life, my mind, and my understanding about reality. It's actually one of the reasons I moved out to San Diego. Vedanta can point out powerful paths towards whole person wellness for our mental health community and a vibrant journey that lies ahead.
Non-dual Advaita Vedanta. Let's start off with a quote depicting the experiences of schizophrenia had by Mr. Vonnegut, where the inner world and outer world communicate. In the beginning, I had to prick up my ears to hear or understand them. They sounded softly and they worked with hard codes to unravel. Snap, crackle, pop, the sound of wind with blinking light and car horns as punctuations. I unraveled the code and made myself so accustomed with them that in the end, it seemed as if I was hearing normal words. In the beginning, it seemed mostly nonsense, but gradually they gained in meaning. When you start to hear voices, you realize that they've always been there. It's just a matter of the right frequency. In a culture of Western individualism with strong boundaries between self and other, these beliefs are seen as pathological and can lead to forced hospitalization. In other cultures, however, as we've seen, these states are revered and nurtured. Can we glean insight from Hinduism's notion of boundary dissolution between self and other in Advaita Vedanta in order to shed liberating and identity-transforming light on people who have these experiences? Central to the Hindu religion are the ideas of Atman and Brahman. Atman can be described as the soul, or the fragment of divinity implanted in humans, whereas Brahman could be seen as God, the cosmic self. Liberation comes from the realization that Atman and Brahman are identical. In this climactic experience, the distinction between the cosmos and the individual is lost. The human problem is that we're blinded to the unity of self and other by Maya, or illusion, causing us to be asleep to our true nature. And being asleep is an apt Hindu description of our current state. Shankara explains that the world is like a dream. When the Maya or illusion of the ego is dimmed, The unity of the inner and outer world is seen, just like in Jung's Unus Mundus. This could make us reframe Mr. Vonnegut's experience into a mystical one, even if it's unrecognized or mismanaged by him. We need conceptual maps for people to find their footing in these domains. And by standing on the shoulders of giants, we can see further, which is what Carl Jung said about his use of Plato in his ideas. Let's turn to those giant Greek titans. Plato and the Greeks. Plato described divine madness as a gift of the gods. And in Phaedrus, Socrates says, in fact, the best things we have come from madness. Plato proposed 4 different types of good madness. Prophecy, the manic art called ecstasy, caused by the god Apollo. Mystical revelations, called teleskita, caused by Dionysus. Poetic art, called enthusiasm, attributed to the muses. And the madness of lovers, called delirium, caused by Aphrodite and Eros. Greek mythology tells of Chiron, who became wounded and by overcoming his own pain, was able to become a compassionate teacher of healing to others. Jung and the psychologist and theologian Henry Nouwen both used this myth to talk about the wounded healer. And research has shown that 73.9% of counselors and psychotherapists have experienced one or more wounding experiences leading to their career choice. Lived experience is powerful. Carl Jung said the doctor is effective only when he himself is affected. Only the wounded physician heals. But when the doctor wears his personality like a coat of armor, he has no effect. One of the things experience can teach us is balance, in line with the Native Americans' emphasis. Another Greek myth teaches us the lesson of balance too. Icarus was given wings, but told to find the balance. He was told not to fly too low so that the sea's moisture would clog his wings, and not to fly too high so the sun's heat would melt them. Icarus, like I did, flew too high. The sun melted the wax of his wings and he came plummeting down to the depths. Once again, as in the other models we've explored, there needs to be a balance, a controlled navigation of these states for the benefit of those around us. Plato said, madness here must go firmly in hand with reason, learning, and self-control in both love and art. Self-control is the fruit of the Holy Spirit in Christianity. Let's finish up our spiritual section talking about monotheism. Monotheism is the belief in one God, and the giant world religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all monotheistic. Moses spoke to a burning bush. Muhammad spoke to an angel, and people misunderstood Jesus. The Bible tells us that Jesus was accused of being mad by both society and even his family. Jesus was told by an appearance of the tempter to jump off a tall building and to seek glory for himself. But because he didn't put God to the test and glorified God instead of himself, he was given honor through suffering. There's a theme of paradox in Christianity. It's through losing your life that you find it, as we've heard. It's in being weak that you're strong. And sometimes in the lowest positions of society that the greatest live. And that life, that strength, that paradox can be experienced in powerful states of non-ordinary consciousness. And the number of these encounters is growing hugely in Christianity today. Pentecostalism is one of the fastest growing denominations around the world. They practice prophecy, vision, speaking in unknown languages, and hearing voices. Pentecostalism is particularly growing in African and Asian countries, and maybe we can see why now after looking at their cultures. According to Tanya Lerman from Stanford, the hearing of spiritual voices may seem to be mental illness to many people, but to the followers who shout and dance together as a crowd, it isn't. The followers believe that there's a long tradition in Christian spirituality, where saints such as Augustine have had similar experiences of deliberate hallucinations and madness. Perhaps the voice of God can be heard. What would the voice of God sound like in the San Diegan mental health community in our time? One of God's favorite dialects seems to be paradox, mentioned earlier. Thomas Merton, the famous Catholic monk and mystic, wrote, "In mystical experience, the spirit of the person is indeed aware of the reality of God as other, immanently present within itself, but also becomes conscious of the union and sameness which unite him to itself. And this is the great paradox, without which mysticism would become schizophrenia. splitting a person's whole personality and destroying him, instead of unifying and integrating and perfecting him in the highest degree. May that unity be found in our mental health communities in San Diego. To wrap things up, let's discuss that further. This identity metamorphosis from broken to mystically inclined would serve to empower education and purpose for the people that we serve. Maybe there's a fear that people may abandon the biomedical model and medication, but I think there can be a synergy between these perspectives. These paradigms can offer the view that medication is a cutting-edge neuroscientific tool that enables us to swim at the right height, in Joseph Campbell's metaphor, or fly at the right height in the Icarus story, rather than fixing our broken brains so that we're normal again. Phil Borges, who produced the documentary film Crazy Wise, says, framing a mental health crisis as a degenerative disease of the brain with no known cure can have devastating effects on someone in a vulnerable state of a crisis. Yet it happens all the time. But things can happen differently in our city, and there's a ton of organizational synergy we can access in San Diego that can help. Check it out. There's NAMI FaithNet, a network of faith and mental health communities. There is the Living Grace and Family Grace support groups and workbooks for both peers and loved ones that integrates the biblical understanding with the latest psychology. There's Project InReach, which can send spiritual counselors to inmates in jails like George Bailey. There are many clubhouses, and the opportunity to turn them into versions of Professor Xavier's School for the Gifted. There are Facebook groups with 85,000 plus members combined called Shades of Awakening and Visionary Mental Health that are havens for these topics. There's a mental health art group at North Coast Church in Vista. We could create trainings on mysticism and the world religious traditions in synergy with psychology to equip people who are drowning in Joseph Campbell's water with conceptual water wings. We could use the South African ukuthwasa process of having people go through these healings, share their ailments in the form of song and dance in their graduations. Interfaith is running a series of trainings that equip those in the psychology field with training in spirituality and spiritual leaders with training in psychology. We could make use of the stunning nature and weather in San Diego to embrace the healing power of nature emphasized by the Native American cultures. And so much more. Email me. Humans. We're an interesting and diverse concoction. We're biopsychosocial spiritual beings, and thriving involves enriching each one of these aspects. What if we had a model of neurodiversity to supplement the medical disability model and to illuminate the misconceptions that stigma brings with a full spectrum of colorful light? A 2009 Yale study showed that clinicians' ontological beliefs about what these conditions really are had huge impacts on the treatment and success of their clients. These minds are in our hands. The world and its future are in our hands. When hands are open, they can give and they can receive. And I pray you receive these take-homes today. Today we saw that stigma is time and culture bound. We got to know Newton, Tesla, and Jung, and saw the innate genius that can come through these non-ordinary experiences. Today we were empowered to look at the mental health experiences in light of a broader cultural context, tapping into the wisdom of the South African Sangomas, the Native American culture, and the Filipino Babalans. And today we recognize that we live in a rocking city with a ton of potential. Through these resources, we can be equipped to advocate for ourselves and those we care about within the rich San Diego mental health system. We can change the way we do things. We can change the way we see things. Wayne Dyer says, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Neuroplasticity, neurodiversity, beautiful, colorful things. The water's warm and so are our hearts. Let's dive in together.
The water is warm. I'm gonna dive in. It was so good to share this experience with y'all. And I'm so glad that we get to ride these waves of change together.